Here's some big news to discuss today as the Toronto Blue Jays have made multiple moves, including one sneaky signing for a player that could pay big dividends going forward for the Toronto Blue Jays. So we'll break that down in this episode of Jays Digest, as well as Jordan Romano, Erik Swanson, and Danny Jansen. We have tons of injury updates on those fronts. They seem to be close to a return. So stay tuned for all that and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? It's Gosse here, host of Jays Digest, and the Blue Jays are coming off a big win against the Yankees yesterday in that afternoon game. A very good start to the series, but they made a bunch of moves yesterday, including one sneaky signing for a player that is very interesting and must be discussed. But before we get into all that, along with the injury updates, I want to mention that this video is sponsored by Rentals.ca, and obviously the Jays' offense to start the season has been very bad, and part of that is because they didn't make a big move, and it was no surprise that Jays fans wanted moves in the offseason, wanted one of those big bats. We were involved in Shohei Ohtani, struck out on him, struck out on Cody Bellinger, and fans are upset at Ross Atkins for not making a shakeup to the team. And if you feel like you want a shakeup in your life, then it's time to move, and Rentals.ca has you covered. They are available coast to coast. You can rent condos, apartments, anything you want. Rentals.ca is the place to be. The best part is their website is super clean, super easy to use. You can go on their website and actually click on the map and look at exact locations and previews of what you're attempting and trying to rent, and it is the best. The website is super clean. They are Canada's largest apartment hunting network, so they've been huge supporters of us. They're huge supporters of the Toronto Blue Jays, so if you want to check them out and you want to shake up in your life, then check out the link in the pinned comment and the description as well. And thank you to Rentals.ca for sponsoring this video. And without further ado, let's get into the video, which the Jays are making some moves, just like Rentals.ca as you covered for. But the Jays make a sneaky signing as well as some other roster moves. And let's start with the sneaky signing. Now, we've been familiar. The Blue Jays have been very good over the past decade, really, in signing international free agents. Obviously, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Arjun Nimmala is the most recent one. He was a very high-profile international free agent, and now he's one of the Jays' top prospects. And they went out yesterday and signed another international prospect who's very, very interesting. So here's what it is from Francis Romero, who's always the guy who kind of breaks down these signings. It says, sources, Cuban international free agent Yorman Lecourt, who is 20 years old, have agreed to a contract with the Toronto Blue Jays. It is pending a physical. The bonus is $600,000, sorry, and he will travel to the Dominican Republic in the coming days. He left Cuba in 2023 and settled in Mexico. And this is very interesting. And if you haven't heard of him, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. It is an outfield prospect. So the first time we signed an outfield international prospect in a little bit. Obviously, Nimmala can play a bunch of different positions, but he's an interesting one. He's 20 years old, so he's not as young as some of the other guys that they've signed in the international pool, but he could be a big impact prospect going forward, and he's not one of the most high-profile names in the international prospect pool if you're unfamiliar with it, but he's 6'4", 205 pounds. He's an athlete that projects power, which is something the Jays desperately need, and now they currently have $634,000 remaining in their budget, and he hit an absolute bomb in that inter-squad game in the Mexican League. But the big thing with him is, obviously, prospect like this, he is not going to be on the team this year. He probably won't even play for the Blue Jays next year. Who knows about that, but he is a guy who's 6'4". He's an outfielder that projects for power, and that is something the Jays desperately need, even just in their prospect system. Obviously, we have Ricky Tiedemann. We have some decent pitching prospects. The outfield prospects for the Jays are not quite as exciting as some of the infield prospects, and specifically the pitchers that they have. And when you're actually looking at Lecourt, so he obviously was born in 2004, but if you're interested in kind of what his profile is, he only played in 9 games, /238, 304, 286 with a double and 6 RBIs in 23 plate appearances, and he does not strike out very much, and it was by no means a superstar in the Cuban National Series in Pinar del Rio, but he is very, very young playing in that league. He was playing up, and we've seen that before and how much that can impact development in a positive way going forward. And they expect him to start in the Dominican Summer League when it kicks off in the summertime. So a very interesting signing. Obviously, not a big impact for the Blue Jays major league team right now, but it could pay dividends going forward, especially if he can develop into a corner outfielder, which is something the Jays definitely lack, and lack especially in the prospect pool as well. So very, very interesting on that front. Let me know what your thoughts are on him. If you were familiar with him beforehand, I wasn't too familiar, but did some research, and a very intriguing prospect nonetheless. But let's get into now some more roster moves they made yesterday, which was designating for assignment Wes Parsons following a very rough start to his season and calling out Paolo Espino. And we saw Paolo Espino start several games in the spring training and did very, very solid. Some people were kind of surprised that Paolo Espino did not make it over Wes Parsons, and whether that was for roster construction issues or whatever it is. Paolo Espino has played in the major leagues before. He's obviously 39 years old. He hasn't had too much success, but you can see that in 2021 and 2022, he pitched a lot. He pitched over 200 innings combined in those 2 years, and he's a guy who brings a lot more experience than Wes Parsons. He's a lot more lengthy and stretched out than Wes Parsons, and their hope, obviously, is that he can do better than what Wes Parsons did in games where he is the mop-up guy. Because Wes Parsons so far this season, despite being the mop-up guy, was giving up tons of runs and just made the games completely uncompetitive and out of reach. And it was great to see Wes Parsons get a chance, and his story was great. If you saw it on I think it was Blue Jay Central before the season started when he got called up, or was named to the opening day roster, 40-man, and the 26-man active roster. Ultimately, Paolo Espino is probably the better option here, and hopefully he can rekindle some of what he had in 2021 when he started 19 games and pitched 109 innings for them. They would be more than happy if he can just be serviceable enough, middling 4 ERA guy who can clean up and do some mopping up duty, because he's not going to have a major impact on the team and not really the starters, depending how Bowden Francis goes in his next start. But let us know what your thoughts are and all that in the comment section below. And now we have some interesting things to discuss here as we have some major injury updates. And this one is a bit interesting. Obviously, Jordan Romano's out, Erik Swanson's out, Danny Jansen is out, and thinking that the Blue Jays, and kind of just reflecting on the fact that they are 4-4 given how poor their offense has been and all these injuries, is kind of absurd to me. Obviously, they've not been playing well at all, but they're holding their own and being 4-4 against a very tough schedule. It's very, very encouraging if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, but the injury updates are interesting. So here's what we have here. You have Jordan Romano threw a second bullpen, and Erik Swanson threw a live BP yesterday, and both went well, said Blue Jays manager John Schneider. Next up for Romano is a live batting practice, and if that goes well, right into rehab games. So you have some updates on that front. The biggest thing here is getting Jordan Romano healthy and Erik Swanson healthy, of course, because we're thinking now, Chad Green has kind of been the closer for the Toronto Blue Jays this season, and Jimmy Garcia has kind of been wherever he's needed in the highest leverage situations. Who knows which one of those two is actually kind of the closer going forward until one of those guys come back. But some Jays fans, including myself, sometimes take for granted Jordan Romano. He's one of the best closers in the game. He's an elite closer. Erik Swanson is an elite setup man, an eighth-inning guy. And not having both of those guys so far throughout the season, and the Jays still being where they are, we should be very thankful and blessed that we're not like 1-7 and things like that, because 4-4 is very solid. You think about how bad the schedule has been and how poor the offense is. You look at the Toronto Blue Jays averages and the team OPS, and it is unbelievably. I mean, Bo Bichette hasn't performed. We've been harping on this for several videos now, but Bo Bichette hasn't performed. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hasn't performed. Alejandro Kirk hasn't really performed. Dalton Varsho, all these guys, the only one who has is Justin Turner and Kevin Biggio and Ernie Clement. The Jays are in an okay spot, especially if they can get that offense going and the pitching stays the course, because it looks like the pitching is as good as it was last year, aside from the question mark of Bowden Francis. The Jays will be in very, very good shape, especially if they can get these guys back. But I'm not going to harp too much on the offense because they play later tonight, and hopefully they can get something going regarding offense that is desperately needed for the Toronto Blue Jays, and just for them to be able to continue to win games, because the pitchers aren't going to be able to shut out the opposing team every single time. It is just unfortunately not realistic, even though they tried to do it last year and we saw how that ended. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know what your thoughts are on the sneaky signing as well as these injury updates. We should have the Blue Jays back to healthy pretty soon. No other injuries have happened, thankfully, but hopefully Jordan Romano and Erik Swanson come back soon. If you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and thank you to Rentals.ca for sponsoring this one. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll see you later today.